Today is the 4th of July, Independence Day for the United States of America. In 1776, there was an ideological revolution. The founding fathers decided that the government should be for the people and by the people, and they set forth the creation of this great nation. During this era, things were far from perfect, and they're far from perfect today. There are a lot of things that we can look back on and say those things were actually really, really bad. Well, guess what? We know they're bad today because we're the winners. We're the ones who changed everything. Yet for some reason, even after all of our accomplishments, even after all of the successes of our founding fathers, their children, our parents, etc., there are still people today that will insist this country is wrong, it's evil, it's white supremacist. And over the past couple of weeks, there's been a growing and obvious ethical conundrum or ideological split. Many politicians, governors, mayors were warning us not to go out on the 4th of July, to be smart. At the same time, they were backing a different ideological movement, Black Lives Matter. This says to me very clearly that these people don't support the ideology behind what the revolution really represented. Not all of the horrible things of that era, but a new idea that the government was accountable to those that were being governed. The government is us. It's the people. Today, we are being told that Donald Trump celebrating the 4th of July at Mount Rushmore was glorifying white supremacy, that our monuments and founding fathers were evil slave owners, and that it's time to reconsider the global legacy of July 4th, 1776, says the Washington Post. I'm actually kind of upset that there's a negative tone to this segment I'm going to be doing, because today is a really, really tremendous day. It's an amazing day, the best day. Everybody agrees. No, unfortunately, they don't. We have a lot of politicians that are renaming streets, that are allowing occupations by ideological protesters that are being denounced by many Americans who are insulting our founding fathers, our history, and all of the great things that have since come from it. They want to act like this country is still evil. But I'm going to read you these stories. And I want to start by actually showing you a bit of what Donald Trump had to say. He attacks the left-wing cultural revolution. He's right. There is a left-wing cultural revolution. That's the point I'm bringing up. You've got to think about it from one simple perspective. There are two ideologies today. Was the foundation of the United States a day to be celebrated? And should we go out and celebrate the creation of this nation? Or should we denounce this nation, whose real history started 1619? Which ideology would you support? Many of these governors and mayors and some federal politicians have chosen. They have chosen the 1619 project. They've chosen that this country is actually bad, that it emboldened the legacy of white supremacy. In fact, that's absolutely far from the truth. It's the opposite of the truth. It's a fake, paranoid delusion. Donald Trump said in his speech last night that they're taking the worst bits of history and amplifying them to make our country seem evil and awful. But I will tell you, coming from someone whose family did not have full civil rights up until the 60s, it's just far from the truth. This country was created under an idea that it would be for the people, by the people, but that all men were created equal. And it actually took a long time to see this reality. So I have to wonder, as these people march around, mostly young white progressives condemning this country, why it is that my family so desperately sought to come here. Why would they want to come to a place where they faced oppression? My grandparents were a mixed race couple. They were not legally recognized under the Civil Rights Act. They were not legally recognized. I should rephrase. They were discriminated against. In fact, miscegenation laws was the law of the land. It was not popular. And it wasn't until 1964 with the Civil Rights Act, and then 3 years later, Loving v. Virginia, that my family actually got to experience full civil rights. Yet even with those horrifying things, they still wanted to be here. They still chose, my grandparents on my mom's side chose to come here, knowing full well that the country had problems with civil rights. It's because this country gives you the opportunity to make those changes, to make those amendments, because it really is a great country. Donald Trump is talking now in his speech on the 4th of July about a left-wing culture revolution that wants to make this country look bad, and he's right. And I'm going to show you these weird stories. The Washington Post, the New York Times. Now, the funny one is the BBC. I'm sorry, I'm not going to take your word for it, British Broadcasting Company, when you try to pass off anti-revolutionary propaganda. But no, let me tell you, as a family that actually did not have the full benefits of civil rights for a long time, this country is awesome. And I've been to many other countries, and I know full well that the Washington Post is wrong. The legacy of 1776 is actually a really important and awesome legacy, that we've come to create a country where people can be treated equally under the law. To this day, there are still many countries that do not have those principles. So I wonder what would have happened if we did not have a revolution. Some say perhaps under the British Crown, we would have enacted civil rights sooner. Maybe. I don't know. All I know is the history we have is a good one. So let's start and take a look at what Donald Trump had to say and why he was right. And I'll show you what the media has been saying. Before we get started, head over to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's many ways you can give. There's a P.O. box if you'd like to send some stuff. But the best thing you can do, share this video. I'm competing with many of these powerful mainstream news organizations that are actually smearing this holiday, this very important day. And I don't have the big budgets they do. So if you share my video, it gives me that opportunity to, have people hear what I have to say. If you think it's something people should hear. If you just want to watch, then hit the subscribe button, the like button, the notification bell. And let's read from Reuters. Mind you, these stories are all very biased. Trump attacks left-wing cultural revolution in Mount Rushmore address. They say President Donald Trump on Friday accused angry mobs of trying to erase history with efforts to remove or rethink monuments to U.S. historical figures and used a speech at Mount Rushmore to paint himself as a bulwark against left-wing extremism. If the media right now is propping up these far leftists, if the Democrats aren't calling them out, then unfortunately for someone like me who's very concerned about this, yes, it seems like we have only Donald Trump for the most part. Now, there have been a few Republicans who have come out, but for the most part, I felt them to be very ineffective. Well, just to not bury the lead, Donald Trump has announced, countering the destruction of our monuments and our statues, that they will be creating a garden of heroes. He's actually swinging the pendulum the other way. You want to tear down a statue? He's going to build more. That's actually kind of funny. Let's read. They say on a day when 7 U.S. states posted a record number of new COVID cases, the pandemic moved further into Trump's inner circle. I don't care, Reuters. I really don't. They say Trump has not worn a mask in public. We get it. Speaking underneath the framed landmark depicting 4 U.S. presidents, Trump warned that the demonstrations over racial inequality threaten the foundations of the U.S. political system. He said, "Make no mistake, this left-wing cultural revolution is designed to overthrow the American Revolution. Our children are taught in school to hate their own country." They say protest in the nationwide unrest following the death of George Floyd. Protesters in several cities have vandalized the statues of leaders, including Confederate generals who led a rebellion against the U.S. government during the 1861 to 65 U.S. Civil War. And that's where I want to stop. Yes, Donald Trump called out the Culture Revolution. Donald Trump will be right. I won't leave you hanging. I've brought the receipts. I don't know why Reuters didn't give you this context, the context I'm now going to give you. In Portland, a man described tearing down a statue of Thomas Jefferson, saying it's not vandalism. Over in, I believe this also was Portland as well, statues of George Washington was destroyed. A statue of Grant, Ulysses S. Grant, the man who actually led the Union against the Confederacy, was torn down. And of course, park volunteer outraged over vandalism of Philadelphia abolitionist statue. He was Black Lives Matter before there was a slogan. Why would then Reuters only highlight the Confederate leaders who led a rebellion? Why wouldn't they point out that Donald Trump specifically said that they were tearing down statues to our great heroes? In fact, there was one man in Wisconsin who was his statue was torn down. He was an abolitionist who died fighting for the Union. They don't tell you this. Now, we can be concerned about the tearing down of any statue of any monument. I'm not a fan of the Confederate statues. I'm a fan of the legacy of this country that won my family and many other people their civil rights and equality under the law. If you want to take down any of these statues, then I recognize under the law, equality means you don't have the right to just use force to tear down whatever you want. It means that my family truly understood what it meant when equal rights were granted, and that I personally, as a descendant of this history, hold no grudge. Should I? Could I? Probably. Many of these people do. I don't. I don't look at it as I need revenge or retribution. I look at it as, well, now that I have been able to live in this great country that granted my family the rights, I heard many stories growing up about what life was really like. I'm not going to now claim I have special privileges and rights over other people who have willfully given up that power. There was a time when we had identitarian law, when this country was overwhelmingly white and Christian, and they decided that they would grant special privileges and access to them based on their race. And at some point, they decided they would give that power up, and we would have equality under the law. It's not perfect. There's still a lot of holdouts, a lot of problems, but they did it. And so I'm happy they did. Instead of now demanding that I should get retribution, I'm just going to say we should all treat each other fairly and equally. So I am appalled at the desecration and destruction of the winners, the good guys, and that's what they're doing. Well, take a look at how independent media responded to Donald Trump's tweet. In this tweet from Radical Catholic, I'm not sure who this person is, but they've highlighted something very interesting. Donald Trump warned about the radical left and the culture revolution and how they're tearing down our statues. Many in media lied, but here's what they said about it. Here's the New York Times, dark and divisive. Here's what they said in the Sydney Morning Herald, for some reason in Australia, dark and divisive. Here's what they said. I'm not sure which newspaper this is. Dark and divisive. They all kept saying it. The Independent, dark and divisive. And of course, we heard from Hillary Clinton, dark and divisive, dark and divisive, dark and divisive. And in Clinton's last campaign speech, November 8th, 2016, dark and divisive. Why? Because Donald Trump said great things about this country and he defended it and said these people are trying to tear it down? Perhaps. Maybe. Now let's take a look at how the media is handling things. Of course, I said early on that, how the Democrats are handling things. The lead of this video is it's the Democrats and the media. LA Mayor Eric Garcetti branded clown for banning July 4th fireworks due to COVID while backing Black Lives Matter protesters. The New York Times says that 80% of holiday fireworks displays in large cities and small towns have been canceled because of the pandemic. So you mean to tell me that we have LA, we have DC, for instance, and 80%, it's not entirely Democrats, but it's many Democrats saying don't celebrate this holiday because of COVID. You mean to tell me that all of this is being shut down? Yet in Portland, for a month straight, they've not stopped protesting. Tens of thousands of people have come out for Black Lives Matter. That's the point. Donald Trump is right about the Cultural Revolution. You have overt, mainstream cultural support for a new ideology that believes this country was founded 1619, the day the first slave arrived in the United States. That's absolutely not true. And it was actually the framework of our Constitution which allowed us to abolish slavery and grant civil rights. This country is not perfect. People who want to claim so, maybe they're exaggerating a little bit or a little too idealistic. But this country is absolutely one of the best in the world, especially today, because even after everything I've told you about my family and my history, which if you follow my content, you know I've talked about it quite a bit. I've been to many other countries where you don't have these rights, and you got to be careful about what you say. You got to be careful about who you are. In fact, the United States and many European countries are some of the few multicultural countries on this planet that actually grant equality under the law. You can go to East Asia. I actually went to Korea and I found out something really interesting. A lot of people are very, very racist there. I thought it'd be fun to go back where my family had come from, at least part of it. The other part is in North Korea. I can't go there. And I went there and I found out that while the younger generation isn't as racist, a lot of the older generation really, really is. In the United States, I'm lucky enough to where a lot of rights were granted. And it's true, there's still civil rights in a lot of countries, but they're still overwhelmingly racist. They don't like people coming in. They don't like people who don't represent their ethnic majority. And the United States has the inverse problem, I suppose. You have now a mainstream culture that routinely just rags on this idea of white supremacy and claims the creation of this country is a bad thing. Maybe it's an attempt to disprove free speech. I believe in free speech. But hey, if there was any group of people that could prove there are inherent problems with it, it's the people who are given the right to just tear down all of our accomplishments and the great things this country has brought us. Take a look at this story from the Washington Post. It is time to reconsider the global legacy of July 4th, 1776. They say, as the country prepares to celebrate the anniversary of its formal declaration of independence from Britain, we must once again reckon with two dark historical truths. The first is the central paradox in U.S. history. The nation's democracy was founded as a slave society. Technically, the United States was founded at a time when there were slaves. Depending on which historian you'll read, they'll tell you something different. Of course, the New York Times, with their perceivably revisionist history, will tell you that it was a slaveocracy, and that was the entire point of independence, and that's just absolutely not true. Others will tell you that, in fact, many of the founding fathers hated slavery, but it was a mainstream popular institution, and so they did speak up against it, and in fact, didn't want it in the United States. Unfortunately, southern states, which were very pro-slavery, wouldn't have joined in the revolution unless they were guaranteed their right to continue. And it was not even 100 years later, one of the bloodiest wars ever fought was to end slavery, the Civil War. And many people lost their lives. I mean, a lot. It's a huge number. I think it's one of the bloodiest battles in the history of the world. I could be wrong. But guess what? We won. We shut that down. It's over. They were the losers. And it was because of the framework created by the founding fathers. So it's fair to point out, yeah, slavery was bad. Absolutely. We ended it. Good. And let's continue to talk about how bad it was. And we can absolutely criticize the founding fathers for not doing more. But I saw an interesting post talking about the left's view that they are the true heroes of civil rights. And it was a professor who asked this question. If you're one of these people that truly believes you would have stood up to reject slavery, then I ask you, is there something today for which you stand for that is unpopular, where if you speak up now, you could have your livelihood destroyed, you'll be shunned, you will lose your job, your money, you will be rejected by society because the mainstream popular institution is being threatened by you? Are you standing up for anything like that? The reality is most of these people aren't. When you see Netflix and McDonald's supporting your cause, it is entirely mainstream and popular. When Andrew Cuomo said, "You've won, tell us what you want," you are not standing up against anything unpopular. You're being given everything you want by an establishment that supports you. There are other things in this world that are entirely unpopular, notably standing up for free speech and the rights of individuals to say things that are unpopular. So I can't really draw parallels. But I can point out many of these people would not be the heroes they so claim to be. The next point they bring up, the second, is that after cutting political ties with Great Britain, Americans doubled down on the British Empire's project of colonial domination. The American Revolution inspired freedom movements in other parts of the world, but it also contributed to the worldwide spread of white supremacy. And that, my friends, is an overt lie. Where did you stop your history? Are you talking about, I don't know, the 1800s? At what point do you draw the line on where history ends? Because I can tell you this, today, you are actually writing in one of the most prominent papers ever that white supremacy is bad. So I can only conclude that, no, the end of the Declaration of Independence signified the near demise of British colonialism, and it resulted in a country that ultimately gave you the ability to denounce white supremacy and enacted civil rights law, around 60 or so years ago, and granted people equality under the law. Of course, though, in response to Donald Trump's speech, he gets ripped apart by the media. But listen, there was a tweet, and I'll highlight this in a minute, where the Democrats said that the 4th of July event was glorifying white supremacy. And I want to make sure I'm clear when I mention Democrats and media. I really do basically mean the same thing. It's the establishment. They're the same. I know some people might say, well, the media and politicians are not the same. That's not fair. There's no liberal media. Just spare me the waste of time. The Washington Post endorsed Hillary Clinton, okay? They offered up this endorsement, blah, blah, blah. They said, no, what did they say? We are not making this endorsement simply because Miss Clinton's chief opponent is dreadful. They hate Trump. They said he was dreadful. They endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016. Did you know that Hillary Clinton received 500 endorsements from various newspapers and Trump received, I believe, 28? I'm not saying Trump is a good guy. I'm saying the media absolutely aligns themselves with the Democrats. And you can argue it's because the Democrats are right or whatever. I don't care. The point is that bias exists. The media supports the Democrats. That's just a fact. So when I see all of these stories, Trump uses Mount Rushmore speech to deliver divisive culture war message, or Trump uses 4th of July celebration to stoke a culture war, or the Washington Post, at Mount Rushmore, Trump exploits social division, warns of left-wing cultural revolution in dark speech ahead of Independence Day. Or the first article from Reuters that made it seem like Trump was only defending Confederates. I see it from all of these journalists. You know, another journalist wrote the other day, who are these heroes that Trump is concerned about having their statues torn down? Trump is defending the Confederacy? That's what they write. They're liars. They hate Trump. They lie. And they support an opposing ideology, revisionist history, saying this country is bad. The country has problems. Everybody could admit it. I'll tell you what, man. The point I was making early on in this video is that even though this country had serious civil rights issues that didn't get solved till 1964, 1967, my family still wanted to be here. I can only wonder why. Perhaps they saw, as I believe it was Reagan who said, that shining city on the hill. Maybe they saw something, an opportunity, the American dream, even with a bad civil rights record. And even after all the hardships they faced, they still chose to be here. I'm glad they did, because we won. So why would they try and why would they do this? I don't know. Because they hate Trump so much? Now, probably the funniest media critique I can have, and I'm not super concerned, is the BBC putting out this clip where we have a quote from someone saying, "We have to stop celebrating myths. 4th of July, Independence Day is a myth," says Kintez Brown for the Courier Journal. BBC, the British Broadcasting Company. Over 200 years later, the British Empire still putting out anti-revolution propaganda. I do find it funny. I don't care what you have to think, Britain. You, of all people, do not have a say in the matter, to be honest. To be fair, it's fine. Look, if the BBC wants to put out a statement, they can. But I'm not concerned about what they have to say. The American Revolution was an ideological revolution where we decided that the government must serve its people. Guess what that means? It means that even though, yes, the founding fathers were racist and racism persisted for a very long time and a civil war was fought where the bad guys lost, it means that the framework of this country was that over time, the logical conclusion was that minority representation would come into existence and that equality under the law must exist. If the government was for and by the people and the people are not just white, then eventually everyone must have some kind of representation. It's happening. It really is. We've made tremendous gains, and now they want to tear that all down. They want overt ideological laws and rules. Intersectionalism asks for people to bend their knee based on the color of their skin. That is not victory. That is not something to celebrate. That is rewinding the clock. I have to wonder about a lot of these stories. I have to wonder about the Democratic Party. Because it's said, often by Republicans, they're the party of Jim Crow and the Klan and slavery and all that stuff. And those things are true. The Democrats would tell you that they've reformed. I don't believe that's true. I believe there's an opportunity. I believe for the most part, there's been changes. But for some reason, even though we can look at the Democratic Party, especially in Congress, and see a diversity of faces, and the Republican Party is overwhelmingly white, let's be honest. But for some reason, at the local level, the problems that these activists claim they want to solve are being put forth by Democrats. We have these big cities with police brutality, things like stop and frisk. These are Democrat cities. The violence, the uprising, the complaints, Democrat cities. I'm not trying to necessarily play partisan politics, but I have to wonder why it is that they are now besmirching the good name of Independence Day. I hope Americans can see through what this is. I hope they can see the divisiveness and the revisionist rhetoric. And you can recognize all of the faults of this country while still celebrating where we've come, where we are. But why would you tear down statues to abolitionists? Why in Portland did they burn down a statue of an elk? Because it's not about freedom, liberty, respect, equality. It's about something else. It's about weird power gains and a new non-theistic religion, intersectionalism. In 2016, Bernie Sanders stood before Mount Rushmore talking about how inspirational it was. This tweet from Philip Wegman, he says, what changed? Sanders said Mount Rushmore made him proud to be an American in 2016. And CNN seemed to agree. Now people want to blast the presidents off the mountain. CNN said it was a monument of slave owners on land wrestled away from Native Americans. The Democrats said Trump's event there was glorifying white supremacy. What happened in 4 years? I don't know, man. But all I can really tell you is that I believe regular Americans support America for all of its faults. We've won so much. Why would we give it up now to some fringe ideology? I don't know. And I hope Americans can see through this. I hope they celebrate the 4th of July, and many of them will. I hope they recognize the attacks on the core of our history and our being, our ridiculous fake, and seek to subvert the rule of law. I hope they stand up for themselves. Donald Trump is going to do it. He's going to be creating a national garden of heroes. Antonin Scalia, Jackie Robinson, Amelia Earhart, many other people. It's going to be a garden of all these different statues. I love it. I absolutely love it. He's swinging back. You want to tear down a statue? I'll build 50 more. Good. There are a lot of great people that we can recognize. Trump isn't building statues for Confederates. He's building, I believe he's not, the list I looked at least. He's building statues for American heroes. Good. They don't like that. They don't like it because the statues they torn down and desecrated weren't all Confederates. They were abolitionists. One of them was just an elk. I'm not kidding. In Portland, they just burned down an elk statue. I have no idea what the elk did to them. But I think it's really about destroying symbols of our country and tearing down our country. It doesn't matter who the statue is. They want them down. They want to destroy this country. I won't stand for that. Sorry, man. Look, you can complain about history. You can complain about colonialism. I'll hear you out. But where we are today, you can't just destroy things. We'll build from here. We'll continue to grant civil liberties and civil rights. But there is a dark, destructive force on the left that is just trying to hurt. And unfortunately, the Democrats seem to be in favor of one ideology over our own country. I got to say, man, it's one thing when they won't denounce the far left, when the Democrats won't stand up and say the far left is bad. It's another thing when they outright come out and say, don't celebrate the 4th of July, or their allies in media say straight up the 4th of July is bad. That freaks me out. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to record a couple more segments, which will be up at 6 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimCastNews. Then I'm going to fire up the grill and hang out outside and maybe watch some fireworks tonight. I don't know what the plan is for my area because, as you've heard, most of the fireworks have been canceled, but I'm pretty sure most Americans got some fireworks and we can see it all across the sky. People are going to be lighting it up. Stick around. Next segment's coming up at 6 p.m. youtube.com/TimCastNews, and I will see you there.